They didn't notice you when you were there. They didn't see the strength in your quiet moments, the battles you fought without announcing them, or the light you brought into every room. But the moment you disappear, everything changes. Suddenly, they feel what they never felt before, and it's raw, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. Shock is the first thing they feel when you disappear, and it strikes in ways that are subtle at first, like a ripple across still water, then builds into a wave that threatens to knock them off balance entirely. At first, it's disbelief, a stubborn refusal to accept the reality in front of them. They keep expecting you to walk back in, to smile like nothing happened, to resume the rhythm that your presence once dictated. Every place you once filled suddenly feels empty, but their minds refuse to register the emptiness as permanent. The routine of your presence had been a constant, and routines have a way of comforting people, lulling them into a false sense of security. When that comfort is stripped away, the shock hits like a cold gust of wind, leaving them exposed and unsettled. They search for answers immediately, trying to piece together fragments of interaction, to find a sign, a warning, something they missed. Every conversation, every laugh, every shared moment gets dissected under the microscope of hindsight. They replay your words, your actions, your gestures, questioning if there was something in them that should have alerted them to what was coming. In their minds, the absence becomes a puzzle, and their shock is amplified by the frustration of not understanding it. It's not only that you left, it's that you left without explanation in a way that leaves them suspended in uncertainty. The physical sensation of shock can be disorienting. They feel a tightening in their chest, a weight pressing down, as if their body is trying to comprehend what their mind cannot. Their thoughts race and stumble at the same time, caught between denial and the creeping realization that you are truly gone. Everyday moments, checking the phone, walking through familiar spaces, hearing certain phrases, trigger sudden flashes of disbelief because your absence turns the ordinary into a reminder of the void. They might feel a pang of panic when they realize that the place you occupied in their life is now a vacuum that no one else can fill, a space previously invisible but suddenly impossible to ignore. Shock also has a way of magnifying memory. Every small detail, once trivial, now takes on significance. They remember the laughter that filled rooms, the subtle gestures of care, the times when your presence had been a quiet reassurance. These recollections hit them unpredictably, sometimes when they are alone, sometimes in the midst of everyday life, and each reminder reinforces the disbelief. They begin to recognize the invisible threads you wove into their lives, threads they never fully acknowledged while you were there. The shock is compounded by the realization that these threads are no longer connected, that the fabric of familiarity has been torn, and the tearing was something they never saw coming. Emotionally, shock is raw and untamed. It doesn't follow a neat timeline, and it doesn't wait for a convenient moment. It invades thoughts, conversations, and dreams alike. People in shock oscillate between numbness and intense emotional flare-ups as the mind struggles to reconcile the loss of the familiar with the sudden, stark reality of your absence. Every plan, every expectation they built that included you feels destabilized, as if a crucial piece of the world has been quietly removed, leaving them unsure how to move forward. Shock, in this sense, is not just the initial response to disappearance. It is a persistent state of unmooring that tests the limits of their perception, forcing them to confront the absence they never prepared for. Regret sets in quickly after the initial shock, creeping quietly into their consciousness, often unnoticed at first, until it becomes a constant hum in the background of their thoughts. It begins as subtle questions, the kind that gnaw at the edges of memory. Did I say enough? Did I show that I cared? Did I appreciate them fully while they were here? These questions do not have simple answers, and their persistence makes regret a weight that settles deep in the chest, pressing down with every passing moment. They begin to replay interactions over and over, analyzing tone, choice of words, missed opportunities, moments of impatience or distraction that now feel monumental. Every overlooked gesture or ignored sign becomes a glaring omission in the story of their connection. Regret thrives on hindsight. They remember conversations where they could have spoken up, moments where they could have shown gratitude, or times they could have chosen kindness over indifference. Each memory becomes a lens through which their loss is magnified, as they see clearly what they could have done differently, but cannot go back to change. Regret is relentless in this way. It does not forgive ignorance or oversight. It insists that lessons are learned too late, forcing them to confront the reality that while intentions may have been good, actions or the lack of them carry consequences that cannot be undone. It manifests in comparisons too. They start measuring themselves against an idealized version of who they wish they had been in your presence. They imagine the courage they could have shown, the patience they could have exercised, the appreciation they could have expressed. Every scenario is a what if scenario, and every what if compounds the sense of responsibility for their own failings. They may even look at others around them and feel the stark contrast, noticing how relationships thrive or falter under attention and care, and the realization that they failed to cultivate what they had with you becomes sharper. Regret feeds on these contrasts, reminding them that absence is permanent and opportunity is fleeting. Emotionally, regret is heavy and unrelenting. It triggers waves of sorrow, self-recrimination, and longing that often arrive without warning. A song, a smell, a place, or even a routine can ignite memories of moments they failed to cherish, moments they dismissed as ordinary that in retrospect were anything but. These recollections are vivid and painful, each one a small dagger reminding them that time is irreversible, and their choices, small or large, carry weight. The mind replays these scenes obsessively, and sleep offers little relief, as dreams can become arenas where they face imagined scenarios of apology, reconciliation, or corrected mistakes, only to awaken to the inescapable reality of your absence. Regret also creates an urgent sense of longing, an emotional echo that is not just about what is lost, but about what might have been if they had acted differently. They begin to notice the subtle ways they contributed to the distance, the misunderstandings they let grow, and the attentions they withheld. Each memory sharpens their awareness that relationships are fragile, and the things they once took for granted were in fact the pillars holding the connection together. Regret is both a teacher and a tormentor, forcing reflection on personal responsibility while confronting the void left by your departure. It is a state that lingers, shaping the way they perceive themselves, others, and the fleeting nature of human connection, leaving an indelible mark on their emotional landscape. Loneliness creeps in like a shadow after the shock, and the pangs of regret have begun to settle. It is not just the absence of your physical presence, but the hollow space your energy once occupied in their lives. They feel it in the small, quiet moments that used to be filled with shared glances, laughter, or the comfort of knowing you were there. Every routine that once seemed ordinary now highlights your absence. Morning coffee without conversation, evenings without the ease of shared silence, milestones reached with no one to celebrate alongside them. Loneliness is the echo of what they took for granted, a persistent reminder that the fabric of their days was interwoven with threads they no longer have access to. It manifests in emotional dissonance. People feel the emptiness intensely because it contrasts so sharply with memory. They remember the warmth of your presence, the subtle ways you made life lighter, and the spaces that now feel unbearably heavy without you. In social settings, they notice that laughter feels muted, conversations hollow, and interactions strained, as if a part of the world they relied on to anchor them has been pulled away. Even in the company of others, the absence of that one person, the person who understood, who resonated with them, creates a dissonance that nothing else can fill. Loneliness is often most pronounced in these moments of contrast, where the mind instinctively compares what is present with what is missing. Physical environments become triggers for loneliness. The places you once occupied, the living room, the coffee shop, the park bench where you always met, are now infused with absence. Every chair you left empty, every corner you once lit with your presence, becomes a silent witness to your disappearance. Objects that once carried neutral meaning now hold the weight of memory. A book left on the table, a jacket hung over a chair, a shared meal gone uneaten. These tangible reminders deepen the sense of loss, making the absence almost palpable. Loneliness takes shape in these spaces, forming a presence of its own that is felt as strongly as if you were still there but unreachable. Emotionally, loneliness is both quiet and loud. It sits in the background during the day, simmering beneath the surface of routine, then surges unexpectedly when least expected. A song, a scent, a passing stranger can ignite it, triggering a longing that is both sharp and diffuse. Sleep can offer no refuge as the mind wanders through memories of shared laughter, quiet conversations, or moments of unspoken connection, only to awaken to the reality of your absence. It is in these solitary moments that they most acutely feel the void, as the mind searches for a connection that no longer exists. Loneliness also reshapes perspective. They begin to realize the depth of your impact, not just the big gestures, but the subtle consistencies that brought stability and comfort. They understand, perhaps too late, that relationships are cultivated in daily presence, and that absence transforms familiarity into longing. Emotional vulnerability rises, and they may struggle with feelings of inadequacy, wishing they had done more to maintain closeness or to show appreciation. Loneliness teaches them the weight of absence, making them painfully aware of the difference between being physically present and truly engaged, and how easily the latter can be lost when taken for granted. Admiration emerges quietly, often only after the initial shock, regret, and loneliness have begun to settle into their consciousness. It is a recognition that comes not from the absence itself, but from the understanding of the courage and integrity required for you to step away. They start to see, in retrospect, the strength it took for you to make the choice to prioritize yourself, to set boundaries, or to walk a path they may have never had the clarity or resolve to take. This admiration is not casual or fleeting, it is deep, tinged with awe and a reluctant respect for the decisiveness and self-awareness they may not possess themselves. They begin to replay your actions with a new lens, seeing in your decisions an unwavering sense of purpose that they previously overlooked. Every moment that may have seemed ordinary while you were present, every small act of self-respect, every insistence on fairness, every refusal to compromise your values is now magnified. They recognize the quiet dignity with which you lived your choices, and the realization strikes them that walking away is rarely simple. It requires confrontation with fear, discomfort, and the unknown. In their reflection, they may feel both humbled and exposed, acknowledging that while they were absorbed in the ease of your presence, they failed to grasp the deliberate strength behind it. Admiration grows from the clarity of hindsight. They begin to distinguish between courage and recklessness, between strength and stubbornness, and in doing so, they develop a nuanced understanding of the kind of resilience it took for you to act as you did. They may think about the patience you exercised, the discipline that guided you, and the inner resolve that protected your peace. Each of these realizations forces a confrontation with their own limitations, and in that confrontation, admiration is born. It is tempered by the recognition that the path you chose was not the easiest one, nor the path they might have taken, but it was the one that required steadfast self-belief. This admiration often carries with it a tinge of guilt or regret, because they recognize that they underestimated the power of your presence and the intentionality of your choices. They may replay instances where they tried to sway you, to convince you otherwise, or to minimize the significance of your decision, and now they see it in a new light. The admiration is intertwined with the understanding that you were not just acting for yourself, but modeling a form of courage that they themselves may have never witnessed so clearly before. The very act of stepping away, of leaving behind what was familiar, reveals an inner strength that commands acknowledgement. Emotionally, admiration is complex. It is not only respect for your actions, but also an awareness of what they lack in comparison. The discipline, clarity, and self-awareness necessary to make such decisions. They may feel awe mixed with longing, a sense of humility in realizing that strength is rarely accidental, that it is cultivated, nurtured, and fiercely protected. They begin to appreciate the subtle ways in which you influence the environment around you, the people you engage with, and the expectations you set without fanfare. Admiration, in this sense, becomes a lens through which they reassess not only your character, but also their own, pushing them to recognize the value of intentional living, courage, and integrity. Fear takes hold subtly at first, a quiet unease that grows into a gnawing awareness when they realize the true weight of your absence. It is not fear of you as a person, nor fear of conflict or confrontation. It is the fear of loss, of opportunity missed, and of realizing too late what your presence meant. They begin to see the life they once shared with you as more fragile than they imagined, and the permanence of your departure exposes the vulnerability they never wanted to face. This fear is compounded by uncertainty, by the sense that the balance of their world has shifted, and that the stability they relied on has quietly been removed. It often starts with imagined scenarios, a cascade of what-ifs that spin endlessly in their minds. They wonder if things could have been different, if small changes in behavior, words, or attention might have kept you present. Each thought amplifies the fear that they have lost not only someone important, but also the chance to demonstrate their care, loyalty, or understanding. The mind magnifies absence into consequence, creating a sense of urgency that is almost physical, a tightening in the chest, a restless energy that refuses to be ignored. They may feel anxious when recalling moments they could have acted differently, afraid that the window for connection has closed forever. Fear also emerges through comparison and awareness of your influence. They recognize that your absence creates a vacuum others cannot fill, that your energy, perspective, and contributions were unique, and that the world feels diminished without you. This realization stirs a fear rooted in inadequacy, a worry that they will never again experience the level of insight, inspiration, or connection that you brought into their lives. The fear is not simply about loss, it is about scarcity, about the understanding that genuine presence is rare and that they may not encounter it again in the same way. It is a fear tied to time, opportunity, and the fleeting nature of relationships. Emotionally, fear can manifest as restlessness, irritability, or even despair. It creeps into everyday life, coloring otherwise neutral experiences with anxiety and doubt. They might find themselves overanalyzing interactions with others, constantly measuring what they have against the standard you set simply by being present. There is an acute awareness that relationships are fragile, that meaningful connections can be disrupted or lost, and that the absence of one person can reveal just how dependent they were on that stability. Fear often coexists with longing and regret, a trio of emotions that feed on each other, amplifying the intensity of their internal experience. This fear can also trigger reflection, as they try to understand the full scope of what they took for granted. They may consider how they allowed comfort to replace effort, how familiarity replaced appreciation, and how daily routines mask the value of your contributions. In recognizing this, fear transforms into a heightened sensitivity to absence, a stark awareness that the people who truly shape their world are not infinite, and that neglect or inattention can have irreversible consequences. It is a fear that drives introspection, a fear that haunts dreams and awakens in quiet moments, a fear that compels them to confront both the loss and their own role in it. Respect is the final emotion that settles in after shock. Regret, loneliness, admiration, and fear have run their course. It is quiet, measured, and often accompanied by a deep sense of acknowledgement. Unlike the earlier emotions, respect is not born from immediate reaction or emotional turbulence. It develops gradually as they begin to understand the intentionality behind your choices. They start to recognize that your decision to step away, to protect your energy, or to honor your boundaries was not impulsive or careless, but deliberate and rooted in self-awareness. It is in this realization that respect begins to take shape, demanding recognition of the strength, courage, and wisdom you exhibited. They reflect on the discipline it took to act according to your values, to remain true to yourself even when the easier path might have been to stay, to comply, or to compromise. They may recall moments when you silently resisted pressures, stood firm in your beliefs, or refused to conform to expectations that conflicted with your integrity. In looking back, they begin to understand that such decisions require clarity and commitment, qualities that are rare and difficult to cultivate. Respect arises from the recognition that walking away was not an act of rejection, but an assertion of self-worth and principle. This respect is also informed by their awareness of what it takes to maintain boundaries. They begin to see that boundaries are not merely rules for others. They are reflections of self-respect, discipline, and the courage to protect one's mental and emotional well-being. They realize that your absence, while painful, was a manifestation of this principle, a demonstration that honoring oneself sometimes requires making difficult choices. They may feel humbled, recognizing that they themselves may struggle to uphold the same standards or to act with the same consistency when faced with similar circumstances. Respect, in this sense, carries with it both admiration and introspection, a dual awareness of your strength and their own limitations. As they process this, respect extends beyond acknowledgement of your actions to recognition of your character. They start to understand that respect is not conditional on presence or convenience. It is earned through consistency, intentionality, and integrity. Your absence becomes a lens through which they examine not only your qualities, but also the dynamics of human relationships, the ways in which commitment, courage, and self-awareness shape interactions, and the value of being principled even when unobserved. In this way, respect deepens into a broader understanding of personal accountability, emotional intelligence, and moral courage. Emotionally, respect is stabilizing, a contrast to the earlier waves of shock, regret, loneliness, and fear. It brings a sense of clarity and measured acknowledgement, a recognition that despite the discomfort your absence creates, your choices were justified, and your presence had a profound impact that commands recognition. It compels them to honor the space you carve for yourself and, indirectly, inspires reflection on how they approach their own relationships, decisions, and self-respect. They begin to see that respect is not about reconciliation or return. It is about understanding the deliberate thought, effort, and courage behind actions, and valuing them for what they truly are.